Hi. Jonathan asked me to give some tips for supervision and management, so here we are. I thought that we would talk about staff performance today. Now, staff performance is behavior, which means that it works the same way as the behavior that you learned about for individuals in PBS and safety care. There are antecedents, behaviors, and consequences, and these sort of determine what behaviors we engage in. Just a minute. Hello? Hey, yeah, did you see that game last night? Yeah, wasn't that wild? Now, with staff performance, as with any behavior, the better we can understand the behavior and why it's happening, the better we'll be able to address it and really take effective measures at improving it. So we need to ask ourselves some questions, and the better the questions we can ask, the better we can sort of understand the behavior. The first question that we might ask when we're getting ready to deal with a behavior or performance issue is whether the behavior is something that's happening too much or something that's not happening enough. Do we need to increase or decrease a behavior? I hope you're ready for a picnic. So James answering his phone during the presentation. Hello? Hey! That's behavior that we don't want to see anymore. We want to decrease that behavior. As with any behavior, just like you learned in safety care and PBS, we can look at the antecedents, the behavior, and the consequence to understand the behavior, and then we can start changing things to get the behavior change that we want. So the behavior was answering the phone. We'll look at a couple antecedents, but the consequences for the behavior that we want to decrease are what we're really going to focus on with a staff performance issue of a behavior that we want to decrease. So some antecedents that might have happened were the phone rang, we engage in. Just a minute. And maybe James is motivated to talk to his friend. Hey! And maybe James watched the game last night and he's really eager to talk to somebody about it, right? Yeah, did you see that game last night? Yeah, wasn't that wild? So I have stuff to say. So these are some antecedents. I'm motivated to talk. I heard the ringing, so I know that somebody is available for me to talk to. So I answer my phone. Now let's look at the consequences. And by looking at the consequences, we should get a pretty good idea of whether or not we should expect the behavior of answering the phone to happen in the future. Now let's look at these consequences. What are the possible consequences of answering my phone? So the first consequence of answering my phone is probably that I'll get to talk to my friend, right? Hello? Hey, yeah, did you see that game last night? Yeah, wasn't that wild? So, friend? Now, is it positive or negative to get to talk to my friend? Probably positive. Is it immediate or delayed that I'll get to talk to him? It's immediate because it's a phone, so I can talk to him right away. And is that a certain or an uncertain consequence? That's pretty certain. I can be pretty sure that somebody will be on the other end of the phone when I answer it. Another possible consequence is that I could get caught by my boss, right? So boss walks in, that's a negative consequence, especially if, I count on my boss to reprimand me or say something about it, so that's a negative consequence. Is that immediate or delayed? It's immediate. Now, is that certain or uncertain? If I'm answering my phone, that's probably an uncertain consequence. If I can figure out from the context of my environment or from different cues in my environment that my boss is probably around, that's a certain negative consequence, and I probably won't answer my phone. But if it's uncertain whether my boss might happen to be around or I might get caught, then that uncertain consequence is going to make it more likely that I'll engage in this behavior. So my boss walking in, that's probably unlikely. And what about me getting written up? So maybe I'll have a corrective action taken. So that's also a negative consequence, right? Now that's going to be delayed though. A write-up will usually happen sometime in the future, and it's also uncertain. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. So when we look at this, we have a positive, immediate, certain consequence, and all the negative consequences are uncertain, and they're not even all immediate. So that's really going to bias me towards picking the behavior that's positive, immediately, and certainly reinforced. That's the good consequence that I'm going to behave to get. So what are the alternatives? What are the consequences for not answering my phone? So if I don't answer, So I might feel like I missed out on the call. So I got my fear of missing out. That's negative. That's immediate. And that's certain. I might feel like I had other stuff to say. That'll probably go into there too. But I'm probably not getting any positive consequences for not answering my phone. So the consequence for not answering, negative, immediate, certain. So this behavior probably won't happen. And that's where we see the picnic. The positive, immediate, certain consequence, I'm probably going to do that behavior. Negative, immediate, certain consequence, probably not going to engage in that behavior. So now we need to figure out how we can change the environment to make the behavior that we don't want happen less. So it looks like we understand this behavior pretty well at this point. We have a good idea of what the antecedents are. We know that when these antecedents happen, James is pretty likely to answer his phone. And we know that what the consequences are that are probably going to keep this behavior happening. The friend is there, that's positive, immediate, certain consequence. And our negative consequences are uncertain, and some of them are even delayed. So these negative consequences aren't going to be able to stop this behavior. That's important to keep in mind. If you have uncertain negative consequences, they're probably not going to have a huge impact on the behavior. They can hurt your rapport with your staff, but if it's uncertain, and especially if it's delayed, that can make it difficult to really change the behavior in the way that you want to. So instead of blaming staff for the behavior and saying, well, we've told them, maybe there's something else we can do that's going to make the behavior that we want more likely and the behavior that we don't want less likely. So we might look at some environmental or antecedent interventions for this. Now, I picked the hardest staff behavior of all time. People using their cell phones at work is just like the most difficult thing to do anything about. But there's some things that we might be able to do to make some improvement. We might have a new protocol in a program where we randomly check people's phones and we say, show me your phone, and if it's on do not disturb mode, you'll get a special token. And we count tokens at the end of the month. Whoever has the most tokens gets like an all-star award or something like that. We could put in place a policy where people have to leave their phones in a basket when they first walk into a program. Maybe that would work, but that would probably not be very good for like staff happiness. And that's sort of an important consideration. We also might do like posters or a cultural initiative where we say people who are successful are more disciplined at leaving their phone in their pocket. People who are in more prominent positions or who have been more effective at their jobs, or people who really care about their jobs, are more likely to leave their phone in their car or leave it on do not disturb mode and not check it during the day. So we could put some kind of initiative like that in place. Maybe that would make some difference, but it is definitely a difficult problem to address. And if we can find some other kind of replacement behavior, that's going to be probably the best way to address it. So now we have a pretty good idea of what to do if there's too much of a behavior happening. We can look at it, figure out what the consequences are, and maybe we can consider different antecedent measures. We'll look at each of these antecedent measures that we want to do, or any environmental change, and then we'll look at the new consequences of the behavior that we do want and the behavior we don't want. So maybe we can put new things in place that make it so there's a positive, immediate, certain consequence for a behavior that we do want, and so that we can take away from the positive, immediate, certain consequences of the behavior that we don't want. So what if we find that there's a behavior that we want to increase it? We want to know why the person didn't engage in this behavior that we want. If somebody doesn't engage in a behavior, and this goes for staff and the individuals that we serve, there are 5 different reasons that might be the case. So if there's a staff performance issue and the person didn't perform the behavior, the first question we should ask ourselves is, was the expectation clear? If the expectation is unclear, that's definitely on us as managers, and we need to put in place the clear expectations and descriptions of what we want people to do. Was the staff motivated to do the right thing? Now, maybe that's a staff issue, but we can still put things in place to motivate the person to do the job that they want. Did the staff have the knowledge, skills, and abilities that they needed? If the answer to this question is no, that again might be on us as the manager, because we need to provide more training. And maybe that's on staff for not letting us know that they didn't get a good training before, that they don't have that ability. But we can put something in place and train so that the staff have those abilities. What if staff didn't have the resources? So staff were supposed to go on an outing with the individual, but it didn't happen. We look into why. It's because there wasn't a van available. Now that's something that we can address. We can act on that and make sure that a van's available next time. What if there is an obstacle? So the reason they didn't go on the outing is because there was a behavioral crisis with somebody else, and staff were involved in restraint. So we can figure out that's the case. Maybe we can change staffing patterns, or we can have somebody extra come in at certain times. We can put things in place that we can address that. So if we ask ourselves these questions, we can figure out what we need to do to enact the change that we need. So here's what we've learned. If a behavior is happening too much, we can do a picnic analysis. We can look at the consequences and see if positive, immediate, certain consequences are encouraging the behavior that we don't want, or if negative, immediate, certain consequences aren't really in place. And if behavior is not happening enough, we can ask ourselves, is the expectation clear? Is the staff motivated? Do they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities that they need? Do they have the resources that they need? And were there obstacles in the way of them performing the behavior? By going through each of these, we can make the changes that we need to the environment to enact staff behavior changes without having to be aversive or use any kind of negative strategies with staff. So that's how this all fits into PBS.